Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Amjad Ahmed, and I'm the director of the Empower Middle East Initiative at the Atlantic Council. Today's workshop is the second in a series of 5 we have planned for this year to bring U.S. and Saudi entrepreneurs, experts, and business leaders together to catalyze change to increase women's economic participation in the kingdom. The Atlantic Council has organized this program in partnership with the U.S. Embassy Riyadh, the American Chamber of Commerce Saudi Arabia, and Quantum Leaps. As a venture and growth capital investor in the Middle East for nearly 2 decades, I am heartened by the rise of entrepreneurship and venture capital in the last several years. As the industry continues to develop, we need to ensure it is accessible to women. Unfortunately, globally, this has not been the case. To highlight one example, in a developed market like the US, only 4.9% of VC partners are women. The Middle East, and mainly Saudi, being one of the largest economies in the region, has an opportunity to implement the right policies, laws, and best practices to show global leadership in women's participation rates in the investment industry. Today, we have seasoned investors to discuss angel investment and venture capital opportunities and provide insights into participating in this exciting area. We will kick off with a fireside chat between Lazard Gulf Limited CEO Farah Fustuk and Atlantic Council non-resident senior fellow Nadire Shamlu. We will then transition to a panel discussion and breakout rooms. As a reminder, the fireside chat and the panel discussions are on the record and will be recorded, but the breakout rooms are off the record and will not be recorded. Before I hand the floor over to Nadire, let me first briefly introduce her and Farah. Farah Fustuk is the CEO of Lazard Gulf Limited in Dubai. She began working in the investment field in 1994. Prior to joining Lazard in 2014, she was CEO and Chief Investment Officer of NIG Investment Management Middle East, the head of asset management at NBD Investment Bank, and a senior fund manager at EFG Hermes. Farah has worked at Deutsche Bank and Morgan Stanley as well. In 2012, Farah was elected chairman of the board for the UAE Financial Services Association. In 2013, she co-founded the first nonprofit female mentoring program in the DIFC called REACH. In 2015, Farah co-founded and chaired the steering committee for the MENA chapter of the 30% Club, which is working to get more women on boards and senior management teams. In 2019, she was awarded International Investment Woman of the Year, and in January 2020, Farah launched Tara, a speed mentoring platform to connect the education sector to the corporate world and develop future female leaders. Nadire Shamlu is a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council's Empower Me Middle East Initiative. Previously, she was senior advisor at the World Bank, where over a 30-year career, her work focused on private sector and entrepreneurship development, particularly on promoting growth and competitiveness through better utilization of talent pool and benefiting from diverse and inclusion. Nadire worked with multiple international organizations focusing on women's empowerment, innovation, and entrepreneurship, such as iBridge's Initiative for IT Entrepreneurship, the Center for International Private Enterprise, the Tunis-based Center for Arab Women's Training and Research, and the Arab International Women's Forum. She is also a co-founder of the $1 Billion Fund for Women. And with that, over to you, Nadire.
Thank you so much, Amjad, and good morning to everyone, or good afternoon to everyone, wherever we find ourselves. It is truly my great pleasure and real delight to be leading this session and to have a fireside chat with one of the most fascinating, dynamic, and I would say outstanding women of the region. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and good morning to you, or good afternoon to you, Farah. I think you're in London, I believe. I will not spend much time. I am so curious, I'm sure that the audience is as well, about your path to where you are today and how you decided to get into the career, or how you moved through the career that you've had in this outstanding career that you've had. So if you could perhaps take a few minutes to tell us about how you got to where you are and some of the highlights of your achievements as well as of your career. That would be very, I think, very useful for our audience.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you, Amjad, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And I should be asking you, Natalie, the questions. It should be the reverse. We should be honored to have you here with us today with such an exclusive.
Can I just interrupt you? Your voice is coming through, at least for me, very, very softly.
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yes, it's much better. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you for the introduction, Amjad and Nadari. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. I feel like the role should be reversed with me interviewing you and having a conversation with you. So thank you for that. So maybe I'll just be a little bit quick. I started in '94 in my career at Deutsche. And by 2001, about 6 years into my career, 7 years almost, I basically looked around and didn't see any role models at Morgan Stanley at the time. There was nobody whose life I aspired to live. There was nobody that I thought, I could confide in, I could advise me. And so I left the industry. I went to become an entrepreneur, actually. I went to Argentina. I built a boutique hotel. I failed. I lost everything. I then came back to Spain, did some interior design, some real estate advisory, as one does, to try all kinds of stuff while you have no children. And then I had 2 little kids, beautiful children in Spain. And I was called to come back to the Middle East in 2005 by a headhunter who knew me in London. So I was out of the industry for a couple of years as an entrepreneur. It taught me quite a lot, actually, that even though my background was mathematics and I thought my career was fixed in finance, I realized that actually you can reinvent yourself. You can do whatever you actually feel like doing, as long as you're determined, you're persistent, you continuously upskill, teach yourself. Nowadays, with the internet, you're able to learn so much through people and through courses. And it taught me the importance of having mentors around me, of having role models, of having maybe a personal board of advisors, people that you aspire to look up to. It taught me the importance of a network, and actually a global network. And again, in the virtual world now, you're able to connect to people on LinkedIn or all kinds of social media and really develop these relationships. And I have to say, I believe that women actually develop genuine relationships. And maybe I'm generalizing, but I feel that the men tend to be a little bit more transactional. And I think that's a very powerful combination, actually, to combine the two. The upskilling is super important. So last year I did a course on the foundations of positive psychology with the University of Pennsylvania. This year I did a course on sustainable finance with Cambridge. So it's that continuous upskilling and reinvesting in yourself. And one of the things I did learn in the last few years, and especially through COVID, is the importance of values and really living by your values and working by your values. So when I arrived in 2005 in the Middle East, it was the first time I had been in an Arab country since 1975 when I left Lebanon. I was born in Beirut, so even though I'm 100% Arab, my mother is Saudi and my father is Palestinian Lebanese, I had not been to an Arab country from 1975 until 2005. So my education was mostly in the West. And I felt a little bit, not conflicted, but a little bit, maybe misunderstanding of the culture. And I remember my first meetings in Saudi when I used to travel there as a woman, and nobody would look at me in the meetings and there was no eye contact. And we're taught in the West that without eye contact, there's no trust, there's no, connection. And it was the complete opposite. And I then started traveling around the world, promoting the Middle East as an investment destination, telling people how misunderstood the Middle East is, and especially Saudi, actually, because I have met so many incredible women across the region in Saudi Arabia and other markets, and I find them to be so intelligent, so inspiring. And I find it incredible how the Western world looks at the Middle East and says, because women couldn't drive, therefore they're not working. And people would question, how are you working in the Middle East? And the reason why apparently I was not having eye contact in these meetings is because they felt that I was like a daughter or a sister, and it was out of respect and making me feel comfortable that they didn't want to look straight at me. So I don't want to talk too much. I'm going to hand back to you now.
No, I fully share your experience. I used to work in many different regions of the world, Latin America, East Asia, Eastern Europe, many different parts of the world, and came in contact with many women from these regions across, different strata of the economy, entrepreneurs, ministers, government people. But when I came to work on the Middle East, I was most flabbergasted of the perception that the West has about the Middle East, particularly about the women of the Middle East, and how really the reality is very different than what is the perception. And I set it out also as my goal to try to re-educate the West. It's a tall order, but nonetheless, I think that we all strive to that. But tell me a little bit more about these initiatives that you started, about Tara, about REACH, about the 30% Club. How are you going about doing those, giving back to young women, to women of all, of all walks of life? How are you doing that? And how can people help you in that process?
Thank you. I don't believe it's giving back. I believe it's an obligation of leaders to actually invest in the next generation. So I don't see it as CSR, as people call it. I don't see it as charity. I see it as a leadership responsibility. So in 2005, when I arrived in the region, within a few years of being here, I was asked by many women, do you have 30 minutes of your time? Can you spare 30 minutes? Can we talk to you for 30 minutes? Which I'm sure many of us do. And so I would sit for 30 minutes and I would talk to them. And then I would think, well, what am I going to do for them in 30 minutes? I don't know them. I may never see them again. I don't know anything about them. I don't know whether there's connection, chemistry. And so then I realized in 2013 that there needed to be something structured. And that's when we founded REACH, which is the first nonprofit female mentoring program registered in the DIFC, which has now mentored probably, I would say, over 800 women across the region and focused on the corporate sector. So women that have 3 to 7 years work experience being mentored by women that have 15 years plus. And the idea is to have a 1-year mentoring journey, also connect to universities, create that educational upskilling, if you like, soft skills, improving soft skills, and then the network. And that was REACH. And then in 2015, when I joined, a year after joining Lazard, who were also part of the 30% Club, I realized that there was a lot more needed than just mentoring. Mentoring is a small piece of it, but actually what is needed is a collaboration between stakeholders, government, education, and the private sector. And the 30% Club focuses on the private sector driving these initiatives. So for instance, a few years after being into Lazard, I had one of my colleagues come to me and say, I'm pregnant and I need to take, organize my maternity leave. And according to the DIFC, it's 45 days. And I said, wow, that's shocking, 45 days. What can you do in 45 days? And she said, well, that's what it is. Do I have to follow 45 days? I said, I don't know. So I actually asked my compliance officer to review all of the maternity policies of private sector companies in the financial sector. And we realized a lot of people were actually following international standards and giving 60, 65 days plus. So I went to Global Head of HR and changed our maternity policy. And then the Gender Balance Council also changed the maternity policy in the UAE. So again, the 30% Club is all about leadership, changing and driving these initiatives, changing and driving policies, and ensuring that we change the narrative of how women are hired, trained, developed, retained, and taken all the way to the board. So it's building the entire pipeline. And Tara, the last initiative I joined for lack of, obviously, a lot of spare time on my hands in January 2020. Yeah, and 2 kids. I realized that there was a need for women entering. So it's true that we tend to lose a lot of women when they're at mid-level, moving into senior, but we also were failing to convince women to come into the finance sector for whatever reason, whether we are not doing enough work with the community, whether we're not building enough purpose around the roles. We really failed to encourage women. And maybe we're just focusing on hiring women in STEM rather than just opening it up to women from all different studies. So Tara started with the initiative of creating a program where we speed mentor, like speed dating, women in coming through first and master's level, with women and men in the corporate world. So in all these initiatives, men and women are both involved. This is not about women for women. This is about men and women, male and female leaders, making sure that we are investing in the next generation. And so the way that it works is that we have a room, or now in the virtual world, a group of female students, either undergrads or students, postgrads, and we match them through values with corporate leaders. And they have 30 minutes, or in the virtual world, it's 20 minutes now, in a private room. And then we rotate it. And so they'll meet 2 or 3 different mentors. And it's a 20-minute session. And speed mentoring, because I think the next generation that are coming into the industry don't necessarily want this one-year journey. They actually want to make multiple contact points and learn from as many people as possible. And therefore, if we do 3 or 4 speed mentoring events in a year, we connect them to different people, we've opened the door, and we've made that connection. And I feel that creates an opening for them to then leverage and build.
Well, this is fantastic. I have been in the past members of mentoring groups, both as a mentor as well as a mentee. Would love to help out in case there's any room for me or any role for me that I could play. I want to actually move now to some other topic, because I think what you are mentioning, particularly as Amjad was saying, the financial sector is so male dominated. Certainly the investment, the VC, the angel investor, let's say domain or world is very male dominated. I'd like to maybe, since we only have about 7 more minutes left, put my questions together so that to give you enough time to speak, because we have to finish in about 6 minutes. How did you get into the angel investment? How did you become an angel investor? Number one. And number two is that I read this report last night. Thank you very much for forwarding it to me, which was about the G20 report about gender. And I know that you were one of the co-chairs. And there are certain segments of this report, very well written report. I certainly recommend it to anyone. Even I learned a lot, and I'm very much in this world. There are certain segments in this report which talk about promotion of women entrepreneurship, certainly for women startups. And what I would like to do is that if you could talk a little bit about how you got to angel investment, how you got to do this report, what you expect out of this report as a co-chair, and how we can maybe take or at least realize the goals and the objectives of this report, at least for Saudi Arabia. Not, it's for all the G20 countries, so at least for Saudi Arabia, or maybe also for the MENA region. So I'm going to clump my questions together to give you the remaining time. And thank you very much for all of these wonderful initiatives. I think that it's going to be transformational. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And either I'm going to speak at supersonic speed to answer all your questions, or I'm going to summarize
I'm told that we
short.
have actually 10 more minutes, so you can take your time.
I'll slowly.
Thank you.
So I'm going to take your first question. I'm going to take your second question first on the B20. So the B20 set up something called the Women in Business Action Council, which is set up under the leadership of Rania Nashar, who is one of the esteemed and incredible leaders in Saudi Arabia, probably very well known to the audience. And she put together an incredible group of co-chairs and a task force that was really, the idea was to create a paper that was not just another white paper, but was something that had actionable items inside that we could pass from government to government and really have people implement. And so there was 3 key initiatives that came out. One, and the overall theme really is around, we're not fixing women, we're fixing the system. This is not about, we know that men and women both have to invest in themselves and do coaching and mentoring, but this is about fixing the system. So the one is on policy, creating a level playing field, an equal level playing field, which means that policies on equality, whether it's around women in STEM or specific initiatives around employees, goals, it has to be a strategic vision that comes from the top of organizations. The second one is around female entrepreneurship and enabling this environment. So eliminating the barriers to allow women to have access to expertise and finance. We know, Amjad mentioned that there is much less availability to financing for many female entrepreneurs than there are to men. So whether it's improving financial literacy through expertise, legal support, but it's really creating this enabling environment. And the last one is really the amplification of synergies. So the idea that there are so many initiatives around the world, including 30% Club and REACH and many others under United Nations and the World Bank and the IMF and many others. And many of us seem to work in isolation. And the idea is, we need to create more synergies. We need to create more collaborative impact, not this, segregation and everybody doing a duplication of efforts. It's really combining, creating some unified learning center, and at the end of the day, including women at all levels of the organizations and in these design programs. So you can't just bring in women at the end. You have to bring in women at the beginning and at the design level. And I think we see that throughout society. I mean, I walk into gyms in London and I see that the gyms were designed by men for men. I mean, that's just a simple example, because when I want the things I want to do to work out, the machines are not there. And that's just basic things that, we know that vaccines and the current healthcare system, most vaccines and the health system, the testing was done on men. And so how is that going to work for women in the future? And so these are just basic things that just need to be addressed. And then I'll go to your second question or the first question on investing. So, I am in the investment world, so I advise global organizations, whether it be central banks, pension funds, institutions on investing. And therefore, probably I have a little bit more of a visibility on the investment world and the idea of investing. But I've also started now having conversations with my children and the next generation, and also many women that come to me to say, how do we build our portfolios? And I think the idea is, okay, you need to first understand why you're investing and for how long are you investing. So, you start small and you build it up. And you say, okay, what am I investing for? Is it for an income stream? Is it because I want to put it away for my children? What is the purpose? Because you can't really define how you're going to invest if you don't know why you're investing. Do you need to touch the money or not? Are you okay to lock it up? And then typically, if you're going to go into the VC world and less liquid investments, you need to be able to lock up that money, because these are long-term investments where you're not going to see a return necessarily in 3 months, 6 months. It's not public equities where you can liquidate the investments. So when I built my personal portfolio, I said I need to build a portfolio that is diversified. And this is how we advise our clients. So you say, okay, I need to have pools, some part of it in public equities, public markets, and some part of it in private markets. How much can I put in public versus private is how much cash do you need available? How much do you need ready available? And when I actually got to the decision and to start investing in private markets, I really started through friends and family. You cannot, I think, invest in this market, which is more opaque, less visibility. It's not public. You don't have public information, except through people that you trust, through referrals. So you have a very dear friend of mine who actually introduced me to Atlantic Council, Tala Al-Jabri, who's one of your speakers. She is one of my gurus in the VC space. So, I have another dear friend, Nora Swade, who's also based in the UAE, also in venture capital. So, when you start moving to an asset class that you don't know very well, you need to go to people that you know, that you trust, that you can learn from each other, and you start to build up your knowledge and your expertise, and again, your connections, your network, onto where are the opportunities. But I don't believe that me personally can select individual companies to invest in, but I can go to someone like Tala or to like Noor, who are in the VC space, who are managing funds, and invest through them. And therefore, I'm delegating the selection of VC companies to experts.
Maybe I just will ask a quick question on that front. People may have the impression that if you want to become an angel investor, you have to come up with a lot of money or tie up a lot of your funding. I mean, my impression is that actually you can help out with any amount, any small amount, any big amount. The important thing is to help a a startup, be it male or female owned, at a very critical time with a small, kind of injection of funds that are perhaps necessary to file a report, I don't know, whatever is needed. So I think women can be very much angel investors. They don't need to have huge amounts of monies set aside for this. What is your view about
Sure.
drawing in more women into this angel investment VC space? Because I think that the women, particularly in the Middle East, have money, have resources, and can dedicate them to creative ventures.
I'm a big believer, thank you for your question. I'm a big believer of independence, of financial independence. And I think financial independence allows you to have the ability to make choices in life. And so, yes, there are crowdfunding platforms. There's Eureka.com. There are many fund platforms where you can invest a very minimal amount. And again, you start small and you build up your knowledge. But I think it's important to understand that when you're investing in a business that's very, very early stage, you take much more risk of survival of this business. And therefore, as the business starts to develop, as they start to generate revenues, you're taking less risk as the business becomes more developed. So if you are going to invest very early stage, it's making sure that your investments are diversified, whether they're diversified by sector or by entrepreneur or however they're diversified. It's for you to know that you don't put everything in one place. It's creating that diversity for yourself. And also you build your knowledge as you invest in a business. There's no reason why you can't also tap into the entrepreneurs themselves and learn from them.
Yes, thank you very much. I think we're coming to an end, to the end of this section. It's been really fascinating to speak to you, and I very much look forward to your participation in future events and also your guidance in this matter, because I think that many women can benefit very much from your experience and maybe step into your footsteps going forward. I will hand it over to Amjad, and thank you again for the opportunity to lead this section. Thank you so much, Amjad.
Thank you.
To you.
Thank you, Nadire, and thank you, Farah. I could listen to this for another hour. You gave us such interesting insight, and I think both of you are fantastic role models, really, for women globally, not just in the Middle East. Let me introduce I'm going to call it a powerhouse panel because it really is. And I know that word gets overused, but this is truly a powerhouse panel. I want to start by introducing Tala Al-Jabri, is a general partner at HOF Capital, a global technology fund investing in next-gen technology companies. She focuses on international opportunities, particularly in fintech. Tala is a founding member of Saudi Arabia's Angel Investment Fund and is a member of its investment committee. She is a strategic advisor to Temeric Capital, a private equity firm focused on luxury and consumer brands in Asia. And she is a board member of Women in Fintech in Bahrain. Prior to her current roles, Tala was an investor in SoftBank Vision Fund, where she focused on investment opportunities in Africa and the Middle East, and supported portfolio companies in their expansion strategies into emerging markets. Mohammed Al-Mishka is an entrepreneur and Kaufman Fellow and a technologist. He founded and exited a cybersecurity company, worked as a software engineer at Google and Mozilla, and is an angel investor in several companies. He is a cybersecurity thought leader and won the annual Computer Security Applications Conference Award. He holds a PhD in computer science from Purdue University, focused on the intersection of cybersecurity, machine learning, and cognitive psychology. Faris Al-Rashid is the founder and chairman of the board of trustees of Al-Qal Angel Investment Network, the first angel investor network in Saudi Arabia. He's also the founder and chairman of the fund board at Diraya. Faris co-founded and chaired the Youth Business Forum in Riyadh's Chamber of Commerce for 3 years. He is a founding partner of startups including Kareem, Topravo, Halala, and others. Last but not least is Liz Leahy, who's an early stage investor, startup advisor, and entrepreneur with 20 years of experience leading companies to achievement. She sits on the board of the Columbia Business School Lang Center for Entrepreneurship and is the current board chair of the Georgetown University Angel Investor Network. She is currently the pitch coach in residence at the Columbia University Startup Lab. Liz is also a champion for equality in funding. She is a CVS Women's Circle founder, a group that serves to celebrate and elevate women business leaders. She recently launched Purple Sage Ventures, an early stage fund focused on underrepresented founders who are underdeveloped and underfunded. Let me start with you, Tala, first. The venture capital industry is already a very small industry, so it's very challenging to break in, whether you're a man or woman. But I'd love to hear more about your journey of getting into venture capital. And I think, what were your essential learnings in getting your current role?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Amjad, and the Atlantic Council for having me today. Really appreciate the session, and also very much appreciated the earlier discussion. Thank you so much. So I would say, my journey really started not necessarily in the traditional sort of venture capital beginnings. I didn't necessarily come from a technology background. And in the earlier part of my career, I wasn't necessarily working, directly into finance, even though that was what my undergraduate degree was in. Venture capital in many ways found me. And I think what attracted me a lot to venture capital was, being able to be exposed to innovation, a diversity of founders, and the continuous learning. And that was something that really appealed to me. I think what's really interesting in venture capital is that, while we are seeing an increasing number of women in venture capital, throughout the ecosystem, whether that's on the investor side, but also in terms of the entrepreneurial side, I believe that as women, we're not necessarily, taught to go into those fields. For whatever reason, our mindset is that this is a man's sort of, arena or field. But the more that you look into it, the more you realize that, if you're someone that is looking, is interested in challenging opportunities, is interested in business, is interested in finding ways to actually change the world through business. If you think about the number of businesses that have changed our behavior, that have had an influence over our mindset, how we think, it's really phenomenal and tremendous. And this is why I think technology in general has gotten the attention that it has, particularly during the pandemic. And so, to answer really your question, my personal journey, was I was in management consulting. I really enjoyed that very much because I got exposure to different projects. But what wasn't very satisfying was actually seeing it through. And so venture capital being, the patient capital that it is, when you're looking at companies and you're looking at new projects, you're there for, you want to be there for the lifetime of those companies. And so there was something about putting, your money where your mouth is that really attracted me. And I wanted to, see those companies go through. And so I really was able to transition when I was in business school. I really was not intending at all on necessarily changing career paths, let alone ending up in venture capital. But so many of, the values that I sort of stated that were attractive to me is what took me there. And I think that you don't necessarily need to go to business school to end up in venture capital. I think, also going, becoming an entrepreneur yourself, trying and testing something out, potentially failing, those are all very critical steps and very, formative steps that may, lead you to venture capital.
Lala, I get asked all the time, what's a good industry before going into venture capital? You mentioned management consulting, which is one of the good ones. Did you feel that was a good stepping stone into venture for you?
I do. And I feel like there are multiple paths, right? I have my path, but I know so many people, like, for example, Hamad on the panel, who, comes from a technology background. And I think what makes, a firm or a team, a good investment team, is having that diversity, right? You might have someone on the team who's actually an expert in AI or an expert in, financial services. or someone who, is actually an expert in, scaling businesses, right? So it doesn't necessarily need to be industry focused or geography focused. And so, you need to sort of ask yourself, what appeals to me about, venture capital? Who is a complementary team that I can join who share my values? And really just go for it and prove yourself. I can tell you, both the roles that I've done while in venture capital were roles that I created and weren't necessarily available in a job application. It was really, seeing an opportunity and saying, here's an opportunity, here's what I can do about it. I'd love to join your team. What do you think? When I joined SoftBank Vision Fund, the Vision Fund wasn't looking at the Middle East and Africa. And today we know that they've made, at least 2 investments now in those regions. So that's really exciting to see, because you're starting to plant them, the seed into people's sort of psyche. So create those opportunities for yourself, but you yourself decide, what is it that really excites you, and make it happen.
Thank you for that. That's very interesting. I want to turn to you. You really started angel investing when the term wasn't even really known in the region. So I'd love to hear about your experience with Uqal, but also any experiences you've had with women entering Uqal and starting to invest as angels.
First of all, thank you, Ahmed, Amjad, and thank you for this opportunity to be with you on the 7th. And your question is, I remember when we start 10 years ago, in 2010, it wasn't, the ecosystem was ready as of today. And most of angels at that time are male. And also, I think at that time, also most of the founders and co-founders are male. But we are seeing a lot of improvement in the gender the last 2-3 years. If I can give you some numbers, in Uqal, we invested until now, I think, 98 companies from 2011 until today. If we take the percentage of the co-founders of the female, is 14%. But if we see the last three years, only the last 3 years, which is 19, 20, and 21, the percentage is 32%. 32% of our co-founder are females. So this is giving you an indication that the competition is started. I think female is coming, and strongly is coming. In our region, and especially I see them in Saudi Arabia. It's not only in our ecosystem, which is the angel or the startup founding, even in the hiring. We can see a lot of competition between female and male in good positions. And in Uqal, we have 100% of our employees are female, and really they are very, very good. And I'm proud. The first CEO in Uqal, she's now a partner in one of the VCs. The second CEO, female, also from Uqal, Latifa, she's also working with me now in my venture capital fund. So it's I can see that the female are coming to the ecosystem. Angel investment at that time, even the name in our region, saying angel, it's not. But alhamdulillah, today it's people, they know what is angel investment. They understand why they are in the angels. And it's, as you know, Amjad, this business is, for us as an angel, if there is no passion and you want to help, it's not about money. We are not putting the money just for an investment. It's about helping and try to bring something to the economy and give back to the economy. But you want to work with these entrepreneurs and to help them find their dreams. And I'm proud I was one of the journey of the first unicorn in the Middle East. And as Tala said, Vision Venture last week they invest in the second unicorn in the Middle East, which is Katobi. So I think we are in the best time for both angel and entrepreneurs.
As the numbers you mentioned were super interesting, and the investments you're making within the angel network itself. Are you seeing more women participate in as angel investors within your network?
Yeah, we are seeing, and also we have an angel group. When we started in 2011, we were the first angel network group in Saudi Arabia. Today, there is 4 angel network group. One of them are only female network group. And also in Uqal, we have also male and female. Most of our angel investors are male, but yes, we have females. But most of the investment are coming from male. But as I told you, it's growing. The founder, the co-founders, we can see that the female are coming.
That's great. And I think I want to go back to a point Nadir Ray made. I think a lot of misconception that you need huge money to participate as an angel. I think if you check out a lot of these angel networks, you can start with as little as $10,000, or even lower in certain cases. So if it's of interest, I think it's an interesting way for you to dabble if you have that capital to lock in long term. Liz, I want to go to you. You've had such a phenomenal career here in the U.S. and you're involved as an angel, but you're also a venture capitalist. From the U.S. perspective, as we saw, the numbers are not great in terms of women venture capital partners. My question centers around why do you think that is? Because we can take some learnings from the U.S. and see if they're applicable actually for the region. What have you noticed, and why has that been the case?
Thank you so much for the question, and thank you for having me here today. As I'm listening, I am both humbled and inspired by the colleagues on this panel today in terms of both achievements and passion for female funders and female founders. So thank you for that. In terms of venture capital, as you mentioned in the beginning, it's 4.9% of women are sit in venture capital, and we see that consistently across the states. I think in terms of why that exists, the same reason it exists in terms of women not going into finance. It's perceived to be a more qualitative position that hasn't necessarily been accessible as much to women here. I'd also say here, I assume it's the same, but it's very much an apprenticeship job. So finding a position as you go into venture capital and finding that path to get there can be a very who you know job, which if the position is already dominated by men, it tends to be men to men to men to men to men to who you know. That's changing significantly, and I think it's inspiring to be part of this at this point in time. And I hope that there's some examples or things that are going on here that can be leveraged there, which is there's a much stronger lens being focused on that inequality or those numbers for lack of women in funding. There's a focus on recruiting women into venture capital. And I also think there's an alternative path to how women are finding their way into funding. So whether that's through angel investment, whether that's through working as an entrepreneur and an operator as a company and working with venture capital firms, and then going into venture capital. So I think the thing to impart in terms of learning might be the path to venture capital in the States has traditionally been a sort of set path, as you would, as it had been kind of in finance. But more and more as the lens increases and the way people are looking at how to get into venture capital and the different types of apprenticeships you can do. I also wanted to mention, because I noticed there was a comment on accelerators and incubators. Those are great ways that women are starting to work within companies that focus on the ecosystem for entrepreneurship and funding. That can be a great way to learn venture capital. I always say I went to the school, even though I have my MBA, I went to the School of Venture Capital by being an entrepreneur and raising funding and sitting in board meetings and have to answer questions about the successes or failures of the company. So thinking about getting your schooling in venture capital in different ways, I think is an incredibly, I hope, helpful tip.
Very helpful. I want to focus on one issue you mentioned about putting a lens on this. And I want to talk about the funders of venture capital. Are you seeing that pools of capital, institutional pools of capital, are, let's say, looking for venture capital funds that are founded by women, or at least have women partners more so than in the past? Because investors can play a critical role in increasing women in venture if they look for those types of investments. So are the funders also changing at this stage?
Absolutely. So there's two things that are going on. There's actually a new fund that's developed in the US that is focused on female funders and underrepresented funders, if you will. And they're creating that so making access to being in a fund, I believe it's a $10 million fund, at lower levels. And then they will invest that fund in companies that are female founded or underrepresented founders. So you get it at both sides, recruiting more women and diversity into a fund and then putting that back into companies that have diversity. So that's what we're seeing. The other piece of this is more and more funds are recruiting women as LPs in their funds. And it's an exciting time here to be going through that, because I would say we launched Purple Sage Ventures this past year during COVID. The numbers, I went into investing because the numbers haven't changed significantly since I started raising funding about 25 years ago. And what's exciting about this past year, as it's given a pause for those female funders at large funds, medium funds, and small investors to coalesce in maybe a way we didn't, like we're all on the phone today, that we didn't previously, to take a step back and figure out a path forward to work together.
That's excellent and good to hear. And I think we're seeing similar things in the region. I think the institutional funders are paying attention to the diversity issue, which I think is a great way to drive more women in venture. Mohammed, you're a technologist, so you're coming at this from a very different perspective as someone who actually started out as an entrepreneur. So it's a great path, and I think it's important for our audience to know that that's also a very typical path where you see entrepreneurs going into venture later after they exit. Whether they succeeded or not, I think as long as they did a good job and sort of developed a company, it's a nice path to venture. Tell us a little bit about your path and what you're seeing out there in terms of venture capital and angel investing in the kingdom.
Yeah, no, thank you, Amjad, and thanks for the Atlantic Council for the invitation. And I think it's already apparent for everyone in this panel that there is no single path to venture. You start to see some of the most successful venture capitalists in the world. You look at Sequoia. Mike Moritz was a reporter in the media industry. You start to look at, Mark Andreessen, an entrepreneur. You go to others, found them coming from a financial sector. And it's just fulfilling and refreshing that to see this where, to make it's always a question, what makes a great investor, and why would you want to be an investor and live through that path? And one of the two fundamental things that I consistently hear from some of the most profound investors in our industry is two fundamental things. One is you got to have deep desire in living by and being part of the success of others. if you're incredibly passionate about making others successful and being part of their journey, that one of the major traits that defines a great investor. A second trait is having really strong convictions that you inherently build in the founders, in the businesses that you invest in, and go all the way with them and supporting them. If you develop those two traits, or you have like tendency, I've heard Tala said like what she didn't like about management consulting was not seeing it through. So like, having that is always makes a great investor. And going back to a little bit to my path, so like I've done technology, being a software engineer, writing code, to building a company, to getting investors, getting the company acquired, working in advisory, and then being an angel investor, and finally now leading a fund that invests between the US and the MENA region. It has been always humbling that this industry, you're always learning. We heard Farah after more than 20, 25, 30 years of experience, she's still learning. She's taking course every year. She's focusing on a new skill. She's opening her mind to new opportunities. And that may be something that continuously would help people to figure out their way into venture and what gets them there, and that hunger and desire for learning.
Mohammed, we heard about apprenticeship, right? And I think that's the traditional path in venture and private equity, and that's the path I took. I mean, I don't think I interviewed for any job. It just came through networking. How do you think, and from the female perspective, specifically in Saudi, do you think that there's an awareness of networking by women and men, frankly? I find that it's sort of weak, to be honest. What can you say to that? Is that changing? How do we change that? Because that's an important skill set, I think, for everyone who's trying to break into this industry, whether you're raising money as an entrepreneur or wanting to become an angel or a venture capitalist. What are you seeing in that aspect, and how can we improve the networking capabilities of people there?
I think that's a great question, Amjad. And let me give you kind of like one anecdote that I personally had the past couple of weeks. So there's a program called Qimam that kind of like it's a platform that curates and selects some of the most achieving or aspiring students and connect them with people who can be mentors and advisors. And I met one incredibly young and passionate lady who she's in college. She is not in finance, she's in technology. And she was like, I want to be an investor. And I had a conversation with her. And after 15 minutes, I've given her like the opportunity and the offer to come and intern at our firm and get that exposure across all of this. So what I would say to everyone is aspiring is go and connect yourself to those programs. Be clear about what you want. Don't shy from asking. And if you see someone, you already see like a couple of people in these panels, don't shy away from meeting after the panel, sending an email saying, hey, Tala, hey, Faris, hey, Liz, hey, Mohammed, like, I want to talk about this. I'm interested in this. Here's what I've accomplished. I love what you've did in 1, 2, 3. Can I have a conversation with you and solicit your feedback? I found people are getting more and more exposed to that. Networking, as you've said, as everyone said in this discussion, one way or another, no one get purely hired for a job. They get kind of like through applications. I mean, they get asked or hunted, or sometimes they put themselves out. Like what Tala said, she put herself out for Vision Fund, and she did something incredibly exciting for the work that she's done. So don't shy away from reaching out. Don't shy away from asking, and trust me, like half of the way of reaching to your goals by simply asking for what you want.
Yeah, and I want to stress that as well, because frankly, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for that, just pushing, talking to people, reaching out. And frankly, 9 out of 10 will talk to you. So I think that's that's a very important skill set to learn. So we're going to continue this discussion, but in a more intimate setting, in a private setting, in the breakout rooms. So thank you all, but please stay with us. Before we transition to the breakouts, we'd like to conduct a very short poll. Please go through the link that we're dropping in the chat. It's only 3 questions, so please answer them all, and then we'll come back and I'll walk you through the breakout rooms.
Hello? I think the link is not working. Is it working with everyone else?
It's working. Yeah, I see it working. You can resend it again, but it is working for others.
Because it tells me, sorry, but the presentation is no longer active. I want to enter a new code or I want to sign up.
Okay, you know what I'll do? I'll send you another way to do it, but I do see that link is working for most. Let me just send another way to do it in the chat as well, if it's not working for anybody else.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay. Okay, we will now split into 2 breakout groups, including our panelists. So you can ask them questions directly. And like we said before, it will not be recorded, that session. So please feel free to ask any questions you want. We'd appreciate if you turn on your camera so you can engage with everyone on the panel. The groups will be moderated by Nadire Shamlu and Jamie Stansberry. You met Nadire, so let me introduce Jamie. Jamie Stansberry is chair of AmCham Saudi Arabia's Women in Business Committee. Jamie has been based in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia for over a decade, and she first came to Saudi Arabia as a strategy and operations consultant in Deloitte's federal practice in Washington, D.C. For 2 years, she led operations to set up a bilateral program management office for the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh. After launching her own consulting practice 6 years ago, Jamie has been advising leading government ministries, higher education institutions, and multinational firms. We will now split into the breakout rooms, so see you guys shortly.